The views and opinions expressed on America's Workforce Union podcast and its digital media channels are solely those of the speakers and do not necessarily represent the views and opinions of the producers or sponsors.
Welcome to the America's Workforce Radio Podcast, the flagship production of the American Workers Radio and Podcast Network, where organized labor and its never-ending fight to protect the rights of the American worker come first. Now, presented by LIUNA, Laborers International Union of North America. Here's your host, Ed Flash Ferens.
Concession workers at the home of the Minnesota Twins plan to walk out next Monday. Meanwhile, Amazon challenging a labor board ruling from 4 years ago at their Staten Island warehouse. And today on the show, the OFT and the UPTE. Welcome to the Wednesday, June 17th edition of America's Workforce, where we're available on at least 5 platforms. That includes YouTube, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, and Pandora. We have 2 guests on the show today. We're going to kick things off in a few minutes with Melissa Cropper, longtime supporter of America's Workforce on behalf of the Ohio Federation of Teachers. oh.aft.org is a website you want to go to. And the first thing she's going to talk about is a new vision for America's public schools that reigns in screen time and artificial intelligence. It's a 10-point plan, and this is coming from the American Federation of Teachers, which includes age-based technological guidelines, including a ban on screen time for students in pre-K through 2nd grade, and a ban on student-facing AI in elementary schools. Kind of get back to critical thinking. That's what it's all about. We're also going to get into voucher accountability on multiple fronts. Advocates for public schools are pushing back against the privatization of education. And right now in the state of Ohio, over $1 billion of public money has gone to private schools. Yeah, over the course of several years. We'll get into that. And lastly, workers keep winning with first contracts. We got a couple of charter schools that have union victories and first contracts. She's going to run that down. In the meantime, the Columbus Metropolitan workers, they are really trying to form a union, and they're dealing with a lot of union busting, and she'll speak to that. So Melissa Cropper will be our first guest. Then we're going to go to the West Coast and join Dan Russell. Now, Dan is the president and chief negotiator for the University Professional and Technical Employees, which is affiliated with the Communication Workers of America Local 9119. National website is UPTE.org. And I'll tell you, Dan is a happy camper because more than 2,100 tech workers at the University of California recently voted to join his union. So with the addition of the system analysts, database administrators, and other IT workers, UPTE-CWA has become the largest tech union in the country. So congratulations to Dan Russell and his team there. You'll be hearing from him later in the show. Now, a brief look into the world of labor. This segment brought to you by Boyd Watterson Asset Management. You can find more at boydwatterson.com. Concession workers at Target Field, which is the home of the Minnesota Twins, have announced their plans to strike starting next Monday, June 22nd. The workers are employed by Delaware North and represented by Unite Here Local 17. Last month, 81% of the stadium's 500 food and beverage workers voted to authorize a strike, seeking health insurance, improved job security, and increased wages. The union has also pushed back against Delaware North's use of nonprofit volunteers. Though the union and Delaware North have been in talks since the workers' previous contract expired in January, very little progress has been made. That's why they're planning to go on strike. Now, as the strike is set to begin at the beginning of the Twin Series against the reigning World Series champs, the Los Angeles Dodgers, the union is asking fans to bring their own food and beverages to the game to avoid crossing the picket line. We'll see what happens on Monday. Amazon, meanwhile, is challenging the National Labor Relations Board certification. This goes back to 2022 of the union of over 5,000 workers at their Staten Island Amazon warehouse. This was a big story when they organized. Well, the NLRA's permissive venue provision, there's always something, right, in the law? This provision allowed Amazon to file this challenge in any circuit where it does business. So they chose the Fifth Circuit, very conservative group there. When the Teamsters filed in the Second Circuit, a random lottery between the two venues was triggered, which Amazon won in April. Now, the panel of judges split 2-1 against the NLRB to transfer the case to New York, where the events in question took place. The opinion, which is only a 1-page long, does not include any reasoning. But of course, it's a victory for Amazon, given the NLRB's relatively low rate of success in the Fifth Circuit. Amazing, just amazing what companies will do to stop unions. All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, Melissa Cropper, president of the Ohio Federation of Teachers.
You're listening to America's Workforce with Ed Flash Ferens.
It takes LIUNA to build North America's infrastructure. From roads and bridges to schools and skyscrapers, the men and women of LIUNA, the Laborers International Union of North America, build the projects we depend on. From constructing the Freedom Tower on the site of the former World Trade Center to untangling Washington, D.C.'s congested interstate, LIUNA members do the work that matters. Find out what it takes to be built by LIUNA at liuna.org. That's liuna.org.
This segment of the show is brought to you by the Brotherhood of Maintenance of Way Employees Division of the International Brotherhood of Teamsters. For more information, please visit bmwe.org. America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the Communication Workers of America. You can find more at cwa-union.org. Founded in 1887, the Brotherhood of Maintenance of Way Employees Division of the International Brotherhood of Teamsters represents the employees responsible for tirelessly constructing and maintaining the national rail system in America. For more than a century, the Brotherhood of Maintenance of Way Employees has proven they have what it takes to protect its members and meet the ever-changing challenges of the rail industry. Today, the BMWED continues to fight for job security, fair wages, better benefits, and safer, more modern work environments. For more information, please visit bmwe.org.
America's Workforce Radio is sponsored in part by the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades, District Council 6, representing painters, glazers, drywall finishers, and sign and display industry workers. They remind you that belonging to a union is your right as an American.
America's Workforce is presented by the Laborers International Union of North America. Feel the power right now at liuna.org. The Iron Workers Great Lakes District Council, consisting of 8 ironworker local unions in West Virginia, Pennsylvania, Ohio, and Michigan. We build the skylines and bridges along the Great Lakes. With more work than ever before, the Great Lakes District Council is actively searching out the next great iron worker, whether it's building the next Intel plant or constructing a bridge to safely connect our great cities along the lake. So join the Ironworkers Great Lakes District Council today. Find out how and learn more about the council by visiting iwdistrictcouncil.com.
Now, back to America's Workforce. Here's Ed Flash Ferens.
And don't forget, you can check us out on Facebook or follow us on X, formerly known as Twitter. That would be AWF Union Podcast, AWF Union Podcast. Let's talk about education, specifically the Ohio Federation of Teachers, joining us each and every month here on America's Workforce. President Melissa Cropper, always joining us. oh.aft.org is a website you want to go to. Lots to talk about. I want to get into vouchers, but first and foremost, this is a good one here, Melissa. Devices down, eyes up, hands on. Apparently, this is in conjunction with the American Federation of Teachers. A bold new vision for America's public schools. Let's start off with that. Melissa, what's this all about?
This is a speech that our national president, Randy Weingarten, gave at the National Press Club recently. I was fortunate to be able to be there. It was an incredible experience. This is the vision that AOT is putting out for our schools that incorporates like how we need to be dealing with artificial intelligence and this time of technology that we're living in, but also includes in it our vision for what education needs to look like in terms of having the services that we need to have in the school and also including career connected learning in the education process. So there really was a whole lot packed into this speech. But I think the piece that's really getting the most attention is the emphasis that she was putting on how we deal with artificial intelligence within our school systems, which is an incredibly important topic to be tackling at this point in time.
It sounds like it's a pullback on technology. I'm reading about a ban on screen time for students in pre-K through second grade, a ban on student-facing AI in elementary schools. I mean, I totally get it. That could be a huge distraction. But it seems to be, kind of going back to the basics here. Civic engagement, literacy. Is that kind of where this is going?
Yeah, I guess in some way, I'm not sure that I would label it a pullback because I think that makes it sound like we are moving away from technology, and that's certainly not the case. But it is making sure that that technology is used in the appropriate way. Really doubling down on the fact that we need to make sure that our children are building relationships with each other and with the teacher in the school systems at a young age, making sure that we're building those relationships and that students are learning how to handle information, to think critically, to build their own like social skills and learning skills before we put devices in front of them. The devices should be a tool that they learn how to use and incorporate during their learning process, but it shouldn't be something that replaces human beings or something that replaces their own ability to think. So we need to make sure the students learn how to think critically for themselves first before we start giving them this other devices and other types of ways of getting information. So that when they do have access to AI, that they have the skills to be able to analyze what they're getting through AI.
I get it. Okay. Well, see what happens on this one. All right, let's move to voucher accountability. And I been seeing a lot of stories in the last couple of weeks. And it seems like more and more parents are speaking out because it's, I believe, over $1 billion now has been moved from our tax money into private schools. There's a lot of people saying, wait a minute, have we gone too far? And I understand there might be some legislation, maybe a cap on as far as income, because there was a time when certain folks that lived in certain neighborhoods, more poverty-stricken neighborhoods, they had the opportunity to go to a school outside of their district. That seemed to be the MO, but that's not the case anymore. Has this dynamic changed right now, in your opinion, in the state of Ohio? Or is there going to be some accountability?
Well, we'll see. I mean, there's certainly attempts being made, and you and I even have been sounding this alarm for years around vouchers and the danger of vouchers and how they're draining our school systems. And we've really seen an escalation. That's 2 budget cycles ago when they did this voucher expansion, seeing a whole lot more money even than prior going into the voucher program. So when vouchers were first brought into the state, again, the selling point around them, as you said, was that they were supposed to help poor children get out of what were termed failing schools. I hate to even say those words because I don't like I don't like the connotation of it. But that was the way they're being sold. No one's hiding behind that terminology anymore because the fact is a lot of people who are getting vouchers now are kids who are never even entered a public school to start with. Their families who had made the decision from the beginning of their child's school career to go to a private school and had the money to be able to send them to the private school, but now are being subsidized by the state to send them to a private school. And so much money, like I said, over $1 billion now going to private schools with no accountability attached to them whatsoever. Senators Kent Smith and Bill Blessing recently introduced a bill that would require that if a school takes vouchers, then that school has to be held to some accountability standards. So they have to be audited. They have to show attendance records. They have to show how many students are special needs. And there's a whole list of other things that they have to show. Basically, they be held to the same accountability standards as public schools are held to. They're calling this bill, if you take the dough, we got to know. So if you're taking state money, then we got to know how you're spending that state money.
Well, it's about time. Hopefully, this will move in the right direction. Talk to me about Karen Rigo. I understand she's a Cleveland Heights teacher, and that's part of the OFT. And she spoke recently at a press conference on this. This is starting to get a whole lot more attention, I understand.
Yes, well, Karen has spoken at 2 press conferences recently, both around vouchers, but different types of bills. But Karen is our Cleveland Heights Teachers Union president. Cleveland Heights has seen firsthand the impact of vouchers upon their school district because they've lost millions of dollars in voucher money. And it's gone primarily to students who, again, never attended Cleveland Heights Public School to start with. Again, families who chose to send their kids to private school their whole school career. Yet, money is being drained from that school system to go there. So Karen has been dealing with the voucher problem for quite a while. So she spoke at this press conference just talking about the impact that vouchers have had on their school district. But she also just this past week spoke in DC because there is a lot of people are not aware that in the big beautiful bill, there was a federal voucher that was passed that allows individuals to give up to, I think it's up to $1,700 in tax credits to go into a voucher program. It just goes into a wide voucher program. And then when people are doing their taxes, they can choose which voucher program they want that money to go to. So there's been a bill introduced at the federal level now to do away with that piece of the big, beautiful bill. And again, Karen spoke out in favor of doing away with those federal vouchers. So in Ohio now, we not only have, Ohio vouchers in play, but we've got this federal voucher tax credits in play also that have an impact on schools.
Okay. Lots going on this, and it should be going on because it's kind of like a runaway freight train here. What started years ago, I mean, well over $1 billion and hardly any accountability. That's the problem.
And at a time when our school systems are suffering so drastically, I mean, we're just at the tip of the iceberg of seeing how our schools, how the combination of not fully funding the Fair School Funding Plan and putting money in the vouchers, we're just seeing the tip of the iceberg of what's happening to our schools now. We've got, Toledo closing schools and laying off teachers, Cleveland closing schools, laying off teachers. We see it in rural areas like New Lexington, Ohio. And the next couple of years, I think we're going to see even an escalation of this unless we fix this in the next budget cycle because our schools are just drowning because of the lack of funding. It makes it even more shameful that we have all these public money going to private schools when we can't fully fund our public schools.
We're speaking with Melissa Cropper, president of the Ohio Federation of Teachers. Melissa, I want to talk about some wins here. First contracts. I know they're not easy to achieve. It takes a lot of work, and obviously the organizing part of it. But let's get into what happened recently. I believe it's Menlo Park Academy and KIPP Columbus. What's the story here?
These are incredible victories for us, and kudos to our workers at both these places for their persistence in getting this done. Menlo Park, it's been 4 years trying to get a first contract there. Actually, only 2 people left who are part of the original organizing committee at Menlo Park. As new workers came in, they all saw the same poor working conditions that they had and still were dedicated to getting a union. And finally, after 4 years, we were able to get a first contract there. So excited about that. Equally excited, maybe even more so, about KIPP Academy in Columbus. KIPP Academy spent $2 million fighting both the organizing effort and getting this first contract. But again, these workers hung tough and stayed dedicated to the cause, and finally were able to get a first contract there. This one is a big national win. KIPP is a national charter school, and this is the first KIPP school in the country where we've been able to organize and get a contract there. And so it's just an incredible victory for them to be able to get some pay increases, got leave time established in their contract. Just the fact that they have a contract now that they can work from and build upon moving into the future after fighting for 3 years is a real testament to their strength and dedication to making sure that they were able to have a union and have a contract. So just incredibly proud of these people, proud of the staff that I had working on this. Huge, huge, huge victories.
Well, hopefully what happened in Ohio will spread to other states at KIPP. I'm also reading about first contracts for, Columbus College Art and Design, Athens County Public Libraries, and Kaleidoscope Youth Center.
It's been a big, big couple of months for us. These are all ones that we've been working on for quite a while, and just everything, finally everything came to fruition that all these first contracts came through. So like I said, all these were huge wins. Columbus Academy of Art and Design, again, I think the big victory, the big thing to point out in that one is I believe those are the first adjunct professors in the state of Ohio to have a contract. Again, in Ohio, in the public sector, adjunct professors do not have collective bargaining rights, but Columbus College of Art and Design is a private school. So very, very proud that we were able to get collective bargaining rights for these adjunct professors. Kaleidoscope Youth Center, again, it was a tough battle, and they've been very much impacted by cuts in federal funding. Still, we're able to pull through a solidified contract for those workers there. And these are all big victories. As you said, I mean, organizing is incredibly tough in and of itself, but getting that first contract, I mean, nationally speaking, about 50% of the time, that first contract never comes through. So far, we're batting 1,000 on our first contracts. Everyone we've organized, we've been able to get a first contract for. It sometimes takes a few years, but we've been persistent and been able to pull through and get these first contracts, and just incredibly excited about it.
Yeah, a lot of hard work, but it's paying off. Well, we still have some work to do, I guess, at the Columbus Metropolitan Library, and I understand that Rob Dorrance, who we had Rob on the show, I believe it was last year, great guy, union member, city council member, and he's trying to help them out because I guess they're doing a whole lot of union busting there.
Rob Dorrance is a labor hero in my eyes. He's always been there for us in these contract battles and these organizing battles. And, he knows some of these library board members personally and executive director personally, and was willing to really go to battle for us and call out their union busting in a public way, which we very much appreciate. But we went into this Columbus Metropolitan Library organizing campaign thinking that it might not be too tough because we knew the people on the board and thought they held our same union values. And very disappointed at the union busting that they've been doing, putting out their weekly union education pieces that give very slanted information. We've had to wait 6 months for an election there, which is awful in of itself. These people said they filed for a union election in December. They just got to start voting on their election this week. But I tell you what, I firmly believe that the union busting that's happened has only solidified the people there. I am confident we're going to come out with a victory in this. And I hope that the executive director and the board have learned through this process that they shouldn't be fighting against us. They need to be working with us. And hopefully we can all come to the table and get a contract in less than a year.
We'll see what happens. And I got to salute Rob. He's a great guy. Maybe we'll get him on the show and talk to him about this whole campaign. What do you think?
I think that'd be great. Rob, like I said, he's a hero in my eyes. So I would like for the rest of the world to hear what he has to say about unions and his commitment to making sure that organizing happens.
Sounds like a plan to me. Melissa Cropper, president of the Ohio Federation of Teachers, I thank you so much. We'll talk to you next month. Once again, just go to oh.aft.org for more information. All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to go to the West Coast and join Dan Russell, president and chief negotiator for the university professional and technical employees, and a big win for IT workers. That story right after this on America's Workforce.
This is America's Workforce. More shows available at awfradio.com.
It takes LIUNA to power North America with affordable energy. The men and women of LIUNA, the Laborers International Union of North America, have the skills needed to build and maintain oil, natural gas, nuclear, solar, and wind projects that are shaping America's energy future. From new energy tech to retrofitted facilities, LIUNA members do it all. Find out what it takes to be powered by LIUNA at liuna.org. That's LIUNA.org.
America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the Ironworkers. You can find more at ironworkers.org. America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the International Brotherhood of Teamsters, where you can find more at teamster.org.
There is unity and strength for workers.
We are the USW.
We are the USW.
The United Steelworkers.
The largest industrial union in North America.
We represent 850,000 members in the U.S., Canada, and the Caribbean.
We work in metals,
rubber,
chemicals,
paper,
oil refining,
atomic energy, and the service sector.
We are steelworkers, standing strong and fighting for what's right.
America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the International Federation of Professional and Technical Engineers. You can find more at ifpte.org.
America's Workforce is sponsored in part by Boyd Watterson Asset Management, LLC. Find out more about our investment solutions tailored to meet the needs of Taft-Hartley funds at boydwatterson.com.
America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the United Steelworkers. You can find more at usw.org.
America's Workforce appreciates our sponsor, the Columbus Central Ohio Building and Construction Trades Council, who represents more than 18,000 workers from 19 affiliated local unions and district councils.
Now, back to Ed Flash Ferens with America's Workforce.
And remember, you can check us out on Facebook or follow us on X, formerly known as Twitter. That would be AWF Union Podcast, AWF Union Podcast. One of the many topics I like to talk about is organizing. We're seeing a whole lot of that. And a lot of that has to do with what's going on in America right now, because if you're not in a union, you're not doing as well as somebody not in a union. That is a fact. And joining us as our featured guest today is Dan Russell. Dan is the president and chief negotiator for the University Professional and Technical Employees, which is affiliated with one of our sponsors, the Communication Workers of America. This would be Local 9119. And they recently signed up 2,100 electrical workers at the University of California. We're talking about tech workers. Dan, welcome to the show. Congratulations on that. I want to talk all about it because these things are never easy. But first, Dan Russell, talk to me about yourself, your history, how you got involved in the union. Go ahead, my brother.
All right. Well, thanks for having me on. I'm an IT worker at University of California, Berkeley. I've been there for almost 14 years now. And I was actually non-union when I was hired at the university. The university's had sort of a long-standing practice of creating new job titles, trying to sort of hide work that should be in a bargaining unit from the union so that it can sort of try and have as few union workers as possible. So I was actually organized into the union in 2016. I've been president for the last 5 years and sort of came to see how many other technical workers, were not part of the union and how that was sort of dividing us up, especially when we're, at the contract table, bargaining. We've got, some workers that are in the union, a bunch of other workers that are not in the union. We don't have as much power as we should have to, negotiate with the employer. And also the folks that aren't in the union don't have that sort of same, right to bargain over workplace issues.
I have to ask you, we did a show recently on the prevalence of union busters in America. It's ridiculous. Amazon leads the pack on that. And there's a lot of law firms that make a whole lot of money doing what they do, busting unions. Did that happen in this case out in California?
I think it's a more sort of subtle union busting tactic. The university didn't try to sort of decertify the union or anything like that, but we are seeing that, a majority of IT workers, I think before we brought in this group, were actually outside of the union. So I think it's sort of a more subtle union busting, union avoidance strategy of just trying to move as much work as possible outside of the union, which, if the union is not paying attention, it's sort of kind of easy for them to get away with that. We went on, a number of strikes in our last contract campaign over the university's unfair labor practices. So wish I could say that the UC was a model employer, but unfortunately, it really is up to the unions at UC like UPTE to hold them accountable.
We see a lot of unions involved in very hard work, with the trades, the steel workers, and there's this perception out there that, well, if you're a tech worker, you really love your job. You really don't need a union. Did any of that happen in this campaign?
As time goes on, I think tech workers are seeing sort of the same pressures as other workers to do more with less, to work harder, and sort of losing a lot of their sort of autonomy on the job. So I think that is what, motivated a lot of folks to, take the union more seriously, to sign up, with the union, to get involved in this organizing drive, was just feeling like the university was not really valuing their expertise, and valuing their experience, and is sort of just making sort of dictates on high for how, XYZ should work in a department, rather than actually taking tech workers' opinions and experience and judgment into account when they're figuring out how to run a department.
So, Dan, when did this all start? And maybe you can walk me through the process here. You were talking about how they changed titles, job classifications, and things of that nature. But as far as getting to that 2,100, and what I'm reading here, with that 2,100 tech workers at UC, that makes you the largest tech workers union in the country, with 8,400 workers in the bargaining unit. That's quite an accomplishment. So congratulations on that. But walk me through the process, when this began, and when you saw some light at the end of the tunnel that they were finally going to go your way.
Sure, yeah. So, some tech workers had reached out to us last year when we were in our contract negotiations that had gone on strike. So I think that was sort of a lot of visibility for folks that didn't know about the union before. And I think, part of what makes organizing difficult at the University of California is it's such a big institution. Sometimes you'll have, tech workers who are, the only tech worker in their department, in their building. And so a lot of these folks don't know each other sort of organically. But, when you've got thousands of workers marching around campus, going on strike, shutting down operations, that sort of, shows everybody what's going on. And so I think folks who were sort of frustrated about their working conditions, worried about job security, there had been a lot of talk about layoffs. There'd been a couple of rounds of mass layoffs at UCSF, UC San Diego last year. So some tech workers reached out to us and said, "Hey, how do we get part of this? Get to become part of the union? We're worried about our jobs. We're worried about our career." One of our leaders on our executive board had actually been moved into one of these non-union titles, and so he was part of the organizing from the beginning.
Yeah, that's crazy how they have these different titles for people. Well, you can be union, but you cannot be union because this is your classification. And I know you had to navigate through all that. So you got the win here. Obviously, the next step, first contract. Or are they just going to mirror the contract that you have with the other tech workers? What's the story there?
So we already have a contract for technical workers that goes through late 2028. So I think the next step is really, we're waiting for the sort of Public Employment Relations Board to certify that these folks are in the unit. We'll have to do some title specific negotiations with the university, setting sort of pay scales for each of the job titles. But then also we'll be talking to folks about sort of, okay, what are your concerns in your department? Are there any issues that we, need to come together and talk to management about, even, before we're reopening the contract? And then obviously, before we get to the table in 2028, we're going to start talking to folks about, okay, what are the changes we'd want to see, in this contract based on, it being the first contract for them.
Okay, what stage are we in right now? You mentioned you got to deal with a governmental board here, and I know sometimes that could be a tedious process. What do we know about that?
Just that we've submitted the cards and they're sort of waiting for a response from the employer, sort of standard, procedure, just confirming that we've got majority. So we're confident in that and hoping that, everybody gets certified in the next couple of weeks.
This I have to throw at you. Artificial intelligence. This is the elephant in the room right now. Everybody, across the board, everybody is afraid of what's going to happen. Will it take my job away? When it's going to happen? Next week? Next year? I don't know. But when you talk about a tech worker, when you talk with a tech worker, they have to be pretty much concerned about that. Where are we with all of this right now?
I will say we haven't seen, I think, the sort of mass implementation of AI sort of like in a systemic way at UC yet, but it's definitely something that people are concerned about. I think because, when we've seen sort of reorganizations and introductions of other new technologies at UC, management does not, come to the sort of frontline workers and say, hey, how are we gonna accomplish this? How are we gonna make this work best? How are we gonna make sure that this, maximizes, the delivery of healthcare research and education? And so I think that's really the concern of workers when there is so much talk about AI and so many sort of what are being seen as AI-driven layoffs in the private sector. And even, I don't know if you saw, there was a New York Times Magazine article just recently about how San Jose State University, which is not part of the UC system, but they had sort of done a massive AI rollout that was sort of described as a disaster. So I think it's really our sort of new members trying to get out ahead of that before UC does a sort of mass AI rollout and try to stop the negative consequences of that.
Gotcha. We're speaking with Dan Russell. Dan is the president and chief negotiator for the University Professional and Technical Employees. This would be a partner with CWA, the Communication Workers of America Local 9119. So obviously you got a big win here. I understand too that I guess a number of publications, printed publications I'm reading, I don't know if some broadcast has picked up on this. When you have a win like this, and we got to celebrate it. We are celebrating your win here on America's Workforce, but in the mainstream media, what are they saying about this? I'm just wondering, because it's important that the people of America, unions are favored right now in America. Gallup says people would love to be in a union, and right now they know it's very difficult to get into one because of all the union avoidance firms out there. But what's the media saying about this win in California? I mean, this is a pretty progressive state. I'm just wondering what the message is.
I think we're getting coverage because, tech workers unionizing, like we said, we're now the biggest sort of tech worker union, tech worker bargaining unit in the country. So I think people are taking notice because you don't think of tech workers and more IT workers as typically being organized. So I don't think more mainstream media is celebrating it necessarily, but I think they're, sitting up and taking notice and sort of having to recognize that it's not just Starbucks workers and Amazon workers that are sort of seeing the effects of, their sort of careers and their wages and working conditions being eroded. It's also technical workers, and that we're standing up and organizing and pushing back too.
So another question here, Dan. What's the next step? You mentioned the fact that you got to work out details with the contract and all that. And you've got another contract that you're going to renegotiate in a couple of years. But is there any other part here? I mean, you're covering University of California tech workers. What's the game plan for other organizing in the state of California?
We're talking to other tech workers that are not, so this is not all the tech workers that could potentially be in our bargaining unit. So we're talking to other technical workers who we're hoping will be joining soon. We're also talking to other, healthcare workers and researchers that don't have a union yet. Our goal is to really make sure that every, professional and technical employee at UC is in a union, so we don't have sort of a two-tier workforce, right? So everybody, has the same rights and benefits, and we can all come together when we are advocating for our patients and our research and our students.
Yeah, that two-tier workforce, that's a non-starter. I know the UAW had to deal with that some years back, and it took years to iron that out. So one more question here, and I appreciate your time here on America's Workforce. What's your message to that tech worker listening to this show right now that's in an environment that should be union? Maybe they're working really, really long hours. Things aren't going right in the workplace. They could probably use better pay. The benefits aren't that good. They're on the fence now. What would you say to that worker, Dan?
I mean, I would say to that worker, life is better than a union. I mean, it's benefited me, massively as someone who's now, been represented by the union for 10 years. And I would say if you're at the University of California, reach out to UPTE. We'd love to talk to you. If you're not at the University of California, reach out to whatever union might be at your employer, or if there isn't one, reach out to your local labor council and say, hey, we want some help getting organized, because there's no downside. It's a lot of work, but it pays off.
Well said, my man. Featured guest today, Dan Russell. Dan is president, chief negotiator for the University Professional and Technical Employees, which is part of the CWA Local 9119. CWA UPTE-CWA 9119. 19. That's a mouthful. UPTE.org is the website, the national website. Dan, thank you so much, and keep in touch, okay?
All right. Thank you. Appreciate your time.
And that'll be it for another edition of America's Workforce. Coming up on the show tomorrow, Tennessee, nuclear power, and 3,000 jobs. Sounds like a show to me. You'll hear it tomorrow right here on America's Workforce. Until then, all of you, have a safe and wonderful day.
That concludes another episode of the America's Workforce Radio Podcast. Thanks for listening, and be sure to subscribe so you never miss a show. America's Workforce is a production of Labor Tools and BMA Media Group. Find out more information online at labortools.com.